There's a new feature in Thrive Apprentice called assessments. It's basically your ability to insert like a test or a quiz inside of a Thrive Apprentice course. And there's some pretty interesting features inside of the assessment feature that makes it probably one of the better testing assessment tools in a LMS. I put that in quotes because that means different things to different people. But the assessment feature in Thrive Apprentice is pretty good. You have the ability to do things like grade assessments, and you have the ability to integrate it so that your users can upload their assessments in multiple forms, which we'll take a quick look at, and a couple other really neat things that I think are worth looking at. Also in this video, though, I'm going to go over one of the big downsides of this update, and that has to do with the fact that there's a lot of updating that you're going to need to do to your templates if you have historically been a Thrive Apprentice user and you've done a lot of customization to some of your templates. They are not, what's the word? Future backwards compatible. It's one of the two. We'll take a look at it as we dive in. We'll get started by taking a look at where the assessments feature lives inside of Thrive Apprentice. It's right here on the left-hand side. I call this the inset menu. It's just the Thrive Apprentice blue menu bar on the left. It's called assessments right here. There's nothing you need to do to turn it on. You just simply update to the latest update and it will appear there. Under settings, there is a new option for assessment uploads. When we click on assessment uploads, we have the option to send uploaded assessments to a location. You can select whatever you have integrated under your Thrive dashboard, API, and connections. Right now I've got Google Drive connected and I have a guide on how to connect Google Drive to Thrive. It makes it very straightforward. I'll put a link in the description for you. It's just to a written guide so you can follow along point by point. And that's really it for the macro settings. The rest of the settings happen at the course level itself. Going into courses and choosing a course, the assessment feature is accessed under content, and then we'll just scroll down and add one here. You can either click add assessment down here at the bottom. When you do so, it wants you to select a module for your assessment to live in, or you can select a module and then down on the bottom right, add an assessment like you would a lesson or a chapter. When you add an assessment, you get to select the type of assessment that you want to create. If you have Thrive Quiz Builder on your site, you can create a Thrive quiz. You can let your students upload an assessment. This is why we need that external upload, because we definitely do not want anyone uploading to our website. This might be useful if you have like worksheets and things that you want students to be able to fill out and upload. This might see the most use, I think, if you're not doing a Thrive Quiz Builder assessment. I think this one's probably the most useful. The next one is uploading a YouTube link. I think that's applicable in some spaces. If your students can like create something and put a link in there, might be useful. And then external linking, just they can submit any link they want, which I think has a lot of practical uses. Honestly, sky's the limit with the external link. Let's take a quick look at what happens when we select each of these. So if I select the Thrive Quiz Builder option and I click continue, I can use a particular quiz on my site. I created one for us to use. We can select that. You can see it says to manage your quizzes, you need to go to Thrive Quiz Builder. Clicking that just takes you over to Thrive Quiz Builder. You can make a quiz however you want, which we won't go over in this video, and then just choose it here. One of the reasons I think the Quiz Builder quiz option is the weakest option that you have to choose from is that you can only grade based on pass-fail. You're going to see in some of the other options, there's the ability to choose a different grading method. A grading method that would make a lot more sense for a quiz, especially if you are manually marking the assessment. I think that having it just be pass-fail doesn't make a lot of sense, given that a quiz builder, I mean, granted, a quiz builder, you have control on the quiz itself, but I would want control here. So that would be some feedback. I would want the ability to have more grading methods for quizzes in the interface of the assessments and not just tied to the quiz builder itself. This is definitely an easier option, but I think it's a limiting factor. The nicer features of the Thrive Quiz option is the ability to mark the assessment manually or not. If you say manually, we'll take a look at what happens. You have to go in and manually mark it. If you say no, I don't want to manually mark it, then assessments will just automatically be set to pass so that the user or student, once they complete the assessment, automatically is allowed to progress. I think that this option only makes sense if your student is submitting something where all you really want them to do is to submit it. This is probably actually more practical if your students are, let's say you give your clients access to a course and you're not like enforcing grading upon them, right? That's kind of silly. Instead, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, I need you to fill out these this SOP document, I want you just to submit it so that I can review it with you. It doesn't matter what they submit. If they're going to submit something, they're paying you, they're going to submit something. So I think in many cases, this makes sense to allow people to progress. Okay, so that's a look at the quiz option. Let's just close out of here, or we can click back in the lower left. Take a look at the assessment upload options. This one I really like because they give you the ability to control what your students will upload, and you can control the number of files, the file size, etc. They allow for zip archives, audio files, video, images, documents, custom. I like custom because then you can just choose, like, I want a PDF. So you would just type in here, PDF, and now your students can only upload PDF files. And you'll notice here, unlike the Thrive Quiz Builder option, we have the ability to actually grade our submissions and grade whether or not they pass or fail based on a percentage. So if they submit a document to us, and this is why I kind of don't understand why the Thrive Quiz doesn't have this option, because it's built in already here into the manually graded ones. So if they submit a PDF, you review it and you say, you got, 5 out of 10 correct, that's a 50%, but your passing percentage was, let's say, 75%, then this would not pass, right? So here you can choose basically what you have to get correct in order to be marked as passed. And then of course down here under manually mark assessment, I would need to choose yes, so that an assessment is uploaded. I get to choose what score they get. I enter in that score, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And then the system will then say, was this score within the passing percentage? Yes or no. The same goes for score and category. If I choose score, you can choose what score they get on the exam or the assessment. And the category grading method, I thought was really interesting. You get to choose passing grade and failing grade categories, and you can even load a grading sheet. For example, you can add simple grades like A through F. So if I choose this right here, it's going to automatically load in A, B, C, D, and F. We can add grades A plus through F, and then of course it would overwrite. I think this is also a very good grading system. You can also load the academic version. I'm assuming that most options would be covered here by loading presets, but again, you have the ability to clear them all out, right? Like clear all these, and then I can add my own categories. Like I could say amazing, subpar, whatever I wanted to do. I think that's actually, if I were actually going to grade my students' assessments, the category is probably what I would use. But my one critique here is that I would really like to have a category and a score or percentage. I think that would be really cool to have a mixture of both. Okay, YouTube link's pretty simple. Let's click on YouTube link and it keeps your settings. So we'll just move to pass fail. We won't dive too deep into this because it's the same. You can choose what type of grading method. They submit a URL to you. You watch the video, a YouTube URL, and then you choose the grade. Pretty straightforward, same thing we've looked at before, and then external links is the exact same thing. The one tab we haven't looked at yet, which is shared among all of them, is the general tab. The general tab is pretty much identical to the rest of the Thrive Apprentice course lesson ecosystem. You go to the general tab, you can choose the URL for it, the summary, whether to allow comments, etc. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in a demo assessment. I want to show you what the interface looks like. So we'll put demo assessment. We'll choose an image file. We'll remove custom. We'll say they can upload just images. And by the way, you can multi-select here. I don't know if I said that. You can multi-select to choose different types, but we'll just choose that they can only upload images. Our grading method will be a score, which I think is interesting. We'll put our score at 75 or higher, and then click save. Okay, our demo assessment is in place, and now I want to take a moment to actually show you the biggest downside of this update, and that's in how Thrive handled rolling out the compatibility with existing Thrive Apprentice setups. And I'm not going to be overly critical here because I do understand why it is the way it is. I just think it's super unfortunate that you basically, if you've created we'll use the lesson overview as the biggest example. If you've created a lesson overview template, it is no longer compatible at all. The list component of that, which is the part you do most of the editing on, that's no longer compatible, and you have to basically recreate it entirely. And I think they've undersold the annoyance of that just a little bit, obviously. But let's take a look at that, and I'll show you what you have to do to get your existing Thrive Apprentice templates working with the new assessments feature, and how to know if your current templates will work with it. Let's jump into the design section of Thrive Apprentice, go to Edit Design, and then click on Manage Templates. They have created for us a default assessment template. We'll take a look at that in 1 second. And we also have our course overview. And this is the template that I have to do most of my editing on because thankfully, I don't use a sidebar in my templates. Otherwise, I would have to go into each of my templates if my sidebar was edited individually and make this fix. Let's take a look at the first fix that we have to roll out. So let's go to our default course overview template. And here, if we scroll down, as you can see, mine is very simple. I like simplicity, so I keep mine simple. I scroll down and nothing looks wrong with this, but when I select my lesson list, look at this little message here on the left. Your template needs to be updated. To show assessments, you will need to refresh your sidebar template. I think this terminology is really unfortunate because how great would it actually be if all I had to do was hit a refresh button? What this should say is you will need to completely rebuild your sidebar template in order to use assessments. This got me. I kind of laughed at it. This got me the first time I saw it because I was like, oh, neat. That was a lot of foresight. Let's just hit a refresh button and it will work. Nope, doesn't work at all. There's nothing you can do to this template to make it work, even though it says show assessments. Instead, and this is the unfortunate part, because if you take a look at my design, it's thankfully I use a rather out-of-the-box design. But if you click the Edit Design option, and down here at the Editing Lesson List bar, you can see there are different states in the state editor, like no access. I've done some customization. You do not have access. I've customized the button. I put a lock. If I go to completed, I don't think I made much there, but locked, I also did some changes there too. So simple for me, but I have built much more custom ones for clients that are now completely obsolete and have to be rebuilt. That's annoying, especially for somebody who had to hire somebody like me to build theirs, and they have no idea how to edit this, or they don't have time to edit it. They don't have the desire to edit it. They don't have the skills to edit this. That's just super annoying. So I hope Thrive comes up with a way in the future that if they're going to release new features like this, that they can at least push a button to keep the work they've done and just to add the new feature to it. I mean, I'm okay if they have to come in and push a button to refresh it, but have it be a true refresh, not a rebuild. So that's my point of being critical. Okay, so we know this is dead. We can't use this anymore. So we have to come into our element list. We have to add an entirely new element for the lesson list all over again. Look how ugly that looks. So then we have to, up here in the upper left, choose our lesson list template. I use lesson list 01. I'll replace the template. Thankfully, as you can see, it looks fairly similar. Here's the bold text on the default, and I made a couple tweaks. You can see it's not a whole lot. So on mine, I would need to click into this lesson template, edit the design, select things like this, unbold them, increase the font point to, in the breadcrumbs, go to text, increase the font to something like 18, which is what I believe I use. Click out of the text, it updates everywhere. And then in the default state, if you made state edits, you would go to the locked section. Notice how it grays out. This isn't what I used, right? I kept all the text the same color. So I would come back in here and say I want 100%, click apply, and then I'd have to click on the button, and I'd have to start making different edits to my buttons themselves. So that's the unfortunate first thing you have to do is completely rebuild your lesson lists. Hopefully you used something out of the box like I did and only made a few tweaks to it. This might just be a 15, maybe 20-minute tweak to fix. So that's number one. Let's take a look at the next one that I think is even more annoying, and thankfully it doesn't affect me too badly. Back inside of our templates, let's take a look at my default lesson template. So I'll just click edit on this. So we're inside of my text lesson, and as you can see, I don't have a true Thrive Apprentice sidebar in my template. It's one of those ones that loads off the screen. I've actually built mine manually and created a manual sidebar, thank goodness, because if you do use a sidebar with the lesson list inside of it, you will have to do exactly what we did before. Let's look at an example of that. Here's a default audio lesson. I don't use audio lessons, so I never built the audio lesson template. This is just a default, mostly out of the box one. But if I click on the lesson list, this is not compatible with assessments. What I have to do here is again, go to the right, open up the element, come back in and add the lesson list element again to the sidebar. Then you click edit design, and then don't forget you have to walk through each and every one of those steps for every state of your sidebar. Super annoying, and hopefully your sidebars are shared between your different templates by being able to, here on the left, save and reuse and link your same sidebar to every one of your templates. Otherwise, sadly, I do have a couple of clients that I know about that have a different sidebar template for each different type of lesson. That's a lot of work. And then on top of that, there are some clients of mine that have different templates for different courses, which, if you didn't know, you can actually go into a particular course and change the template. It's a ton of work. I don't recommend it, but they're basically looking at more than 5x the amount of work that they're going to have to go through to fix it. So super annoying, super unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And that's how you fix it. You go into each of your templates and you do that until the error messages go away. Back in here at our demo assessment, if I click the preview button, here is what it looks like. It does not match my aesthetic, and that's because what we didn't do is build a custom template for our assessments. So we have to build a new template. So to do that, again, let's come back in here. Let's go to Design, Edit Design, Manage Templates, and here's our default assessment template that at least was created for us. Let's go ahead and edit this template. Okay, so once you have your template looking how you want it, and this is good enough for the sake of our demo here, you can click Save Work, and now our template is usable and not just using whatever Thrive has put in as default. Now here's an interesting workaround that I found if you want to avoid adding your actual assessments to your lesson lists. And this is independent of whether or not you do all the updates that we just talked about, where we have to add a new list to refresh our lesson lists here. On the left-hand side where it says Show Assessments, if we leave this turned off, then we can come into our course here and we can add all the assessments that we want, and they'll just never appear here on the front end for the user. Instead, that allows us to go into individual lessons, and there is an assessment element that you can search for in the element tray and then just drop in onto the page. And here you can then choose which assessments you want. You'll select your course and then you'll select the assessment, and you can then just drop those in anywhere that you want into the middle of a course, into a video lesson, a text lesson, and then you can choose to bypass entirely the assessment template that I showed you how to make before. So to me, I know this is probably not easier and it's a little more you have to do, but I actually think this is a perhaps better experience, at least for me as the admin, perhaps even for the user, for you to be able to drop assessments anywhere you want to. Okay, let's put that behind us. Got my griping out of the way. Let's look at an actual assessment. Let's do a test on it, and let's see what you as the course owner, runner, teacher, whatever, look at and see when an assessment is submitted to you, and then what you can do with that, and then how we can add these components to our templates. So now we'll preview our demo assessment. This is that same demo assessment that we created in the beginning, and I'm going to upload a file. So as we talked about, we chose an image. I'm going to just take a random thumbnail that I made for a YouTube video and drop it here, like it says. And there it has loaded up. And I'm going to click Submit. Great, it's been submitted. And congratulations, etc. all this default. Now, we can control what this says. This is actually completely customizable. If we hover over in the top quick access here, Edit with Thrive, we can edit our assessment template again. And when we select our assessment element, we can, on the left-hand side, get control of these options. You probably don't want to touch at least the dynamic auto detect section here. It's going to automatically detect the assessment that's chosen. That's the one that you create. It matches it nicely. Pretty much don't want to change that. The default state auto, I think, is a good one that will automatically choose whether or not to show that they've submitted it or not. I think that's a good one to just leave alone. And then, little basic things like error messages and things like that you can edit here. And then the real editing comes in when you click the Edit Assignment Design. And then in the bottom, you get to choose whether you're editing the assessment upload section. And again, you can click on this and you can edit the file upload here. You get pretty much full control over what it looks like. But if we did a Thrive quiz option, you could make that look that way, YouTube, and it actually puts the video there, which I think is really cool. External links, pretty simple. Grade pending. So when somebody submits it, you can edit what the text says here, and you can actually let them resubmit their assignment. And then you can show them what it looks like once their grading has been completed. If there's any grading here, if I hit Edit Design, It'll have any notes. If it's not graded, it'll have notes. And you can see each of these are within special boxes. So they'll only show if relevant. So we'll take a look at this actually. So we'll click done, get out of there. And let's come back into Thrive Apprentice and take a look at the Assessments tab here on the left. And I have noticed, I don't know if it's just my site, but I have to refresh this to get this data to update. But once I do refresh, here it is, the assessments start coming in. You can see that I submitted my YouTube thumbnail. What's really neat is I can actually get control over zooming in. I think this, honestly, I've been a little critical of some of the other parts of their implementation, but this implementation, if I were actually going to use assessments, this is so, so good. Praise where praise is due. This section is phenomenal. Other than I wish it would automatically update without having to hit the refresh button. This section is phenomenal. Like this is just an image, but look at this. I can drag, move it around. I can really review this, really dig in and take a look. And what's so cool is that this file is not on my website. This file is in Google Drive in the folder that I chose when I did the Google Drive setup. So now let's be critical of this and say, okay, this is in the pending tab. So this is a pending assignment we know we need to grade. I will click the grade assessment and I'll write any feedback. My feedback will be, you really need to improve your YouTube thumbnail skills. They're pretty bad. And because I'm giving this a score, if I hover over this little info icon, remember that the passing grade has to be 75 or higher. I think this is a 72. Oh, so close. We'll click save. And now this assessment has moved to the failed tab. If I click on the failed tab, oh, poor Doug, failed his YouTube assignment. I can click review details here and I can make edits to this. I can say, oh, you know what? I had a change of heart. You're into 74. And click save. Still failed, but there it is. I've made an update to the score. Now, as the student, let's take a look at what that looks like on the front end. I've come back in and I've reloaded it and it says your assessment results, again, fully customizable, 74. And there's my feedback. You really need to improve your YouTube thumbnail skills. They're pretty bad. Oh, that's too bad. As the student, I can click retry. I can submit another option. Okay, so first time didn't work. Let's submit another one. I'm just submitting another YouTube thumbnail. They're on my desktop. So I'll just click submit. Okay, that one got sent in. Let's pop back here now. Let's come to the assessments tab. I'm just going to click on assessments and there really nothing happens unless I click refresh. It's one of the things I wish was a little more dynamic. But here we are back in the pending tab. Oh, look at Doug. He's added again. He's trying again here. So again, really cool. In the upper right now, you can see there are multiple attempts. If I click on that, you can see Doug's first attempt failed. But here we go. Doug's trying for attempt number 2. You know what, Doug? I think this one's pretty good. So we'll grade this assessment and say, great job. We'll give this one an 82. Save. Fantastic. Let's come back over to our assessment and let's refresh to see if we got graded. Yay, we got graded. We're done. Now coming back into the assessments section as the admin, I have my past. I no longer have failed assessments, but if I do come back to past and I view attempts, you can see that Doug here has submitted a failed attempt and a passed attempt, but he is counting as a passed attempt. And Doug is also now visible under the All tab. One piece of feedback that I've already sent into Thrive is that I wish there was a way to archive these assessments. For example, I just submitted assessments as a demo, and unfortunately, there's no way to get rid of them on the front end here inside of Thrive Apprentice. Like there's no delete button. There needs to be a delete button. I've sent in that feedback. I feel pretty strongly about it. But I have discovered that if I go into Google Drive and I delete the assessment files that were uploaded there, I think, don't quote me on this, they disappear. Because I have submitted several, obviously I've submitted several tests before making this video, and they're not here, right? If I come back here, they're not here anymore. So I'm assuming they disappear here if I delete them in Google Drive. So at least there's that. So going into my Google Drive, you can see that there are these 2 assessment files that I added here. I'm just going to delete these and see what happens if I can get this to happen real time. I've just deleted both of those. I'll come back to my assessments. Notice that I still have my past and my all. If I click refresh here, give it a hard refresh, they are still there. Last little bit of info we'll look at here is that you do have the ability to sort your assessments by course, by actual assessment, which I think is absolutely mandatory, and then by student. So any student that has submitted an assessment, let's say that Doug, sent me an email and said, gee, I'm so sad I got an 82. What could I have done better? You can be like, I don't even remember what you submitted, Doug. You can come in here, check the box, and now the assessments will refresh and you'll only see the pathetic pleas of Doug, who has strived for a better grade. As I did kind of hint at this, there is a way that you want to connect your Google Drive. You can do Dropbox as well, but why? Google Drive's free. Come into your API connections here, manage connections, and then you can just add Google Drive as a connection. It's fairly involved. As I mentioned, I'm publishing a tutorial. I have to make a thumbnail funny enough. Hope I get a passing grade on that one. But I have created a step-by-step tutorial. I walked through this process yesterday. I added it myself. You have to set up a Google Cloud account, enable the Google Drive API, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of steps here. This is not for the faint of heart, but let me tell you, it's worth it because it's definitely better than Dropbox. And I mean, it's practically free, or if you've got a Google Workspace account for your email, you've already got it. It's just worth using. So step by step, if you follow this to the letter, you can get your thing set up in honestly less than 5 minutes. It's a lot of steps because I've gone into the detail to tell you where to click on literally everything. Walk through this, you'll be good to go. Assessments can also be used at the drip campaign level for a course. You can create a new drip campaign. I just created one where this drip campaign starts once the user accesses the course, and I have custom unlock conditions. So let's say that, I don't know, let's just choose a random lesson, that basically module 3. Let's just say module 3 has an unlock condition, and I can click on the module and click add new rule, and then the condition for this to be unlocked. Now, previously we had Thrive quiz result, which I think was actually still a pretty decent implementation of the assessment. That was basically the start of the assessment system. But now we have this new option down here called assessment status. When selected, you can choose, okay, I want this to only unlock when you have to choose your assessment, and then you have to choose whether or not it was passed, submitted, or failed. I think this is really good because no matter what option you choose for your grading system, no matter what, it ultimately leads to a pass or a fail. Or like we talked about, you can just say when submitted, move on. So this is a great way to say, you know what, you can get the first 2 modules, but then module 3, you need to pass the assessment to unlock and to proceed, or you need to at least submit the assessment to proceed before it unlocks. It doesn't always have to be like an actual grading assessment system. I think this is actually fairly reasonable to use for something like a consulting situation. You're doing onboarding. So maybe module 1 is onboarding. Maybe module 2 then is when you start more of the day-to-day stuff and you need them to submit some documents first. You could use this as a document gate to ensure that your documents are received. So there's lots of use cases for drip beyond just your traditional dripping out a course to somebody over time. Another practical use of the assessment system is inside of Thrive Automator, we have the ability to access triggers in Thrive Apprentice based on when an assessment has been marked and failed, has been marked and passed, an assessment has been submitted, things like that. We can essentially say, okay, let's say we failed an assessment or our student failed an assessment. And here we choose which assessment is going to trigger this. So let's say that we had an email system set up where when an assessment was graded, we sent the student an email. So here we'll say, okay, assessment has been marked and failed. We can say only fire when the assessment ID is demo assessment, right? So you choose your assessment that you want to submit. You can say, okay, when demo assessment is failed, what do I want to have happen? I want to send them an email. So I'll say tag them in my autoresponder. And here, let's say I was using Fluent CRM, I could then add a tag and it could be like failed demo assessment. And then in Fluent CRM, I can set it up so that whenever a user gets the failed demo assessment tag, trigger an email to them and have that email say, hey, Doug, just want to let you know I've graded your assessment. Looks like your assessment failed, whatever you would want to say. And then you could give them a link back to that particular assessment or the lesson that it's in and say, go ahead and retry, resubmit another attempt, et cetera, et cetera. And you could repeat the same process here, not just when it fails, but also when it passes. You can say, "Hey, Doug, want to let you know your assessment has been graded. You can take a look at my feedback, but I want you to know that you can now proceed on to any other lesson at your own pace or when you're ready." Something like that. So there's a lot of options here under Thrive Automator to be able to trigger emails, and honestly, because we have the ability to send webhooks, you could trigger almost, well, you pretty much can trigger just about anything that you can possibly imagine, even off platform. So really, really cool stuff. All right, that's my walkthrough overview look at the Thrive Assessments feature. If I were to give this a grade, I would say it gets a solid, 85, 90%. I think there were those couple of things that they really should have done differently, like not making us have to rebuild multiple pieces of our templates. For some people, it's going to be a nightmare. For me, thankfully, it's just a couple out of the box tweaks. But in general, I feel like this does position the Thrive Assessments feature fairly top of the market. I think this is probably the best assessments feature implementation across the WordPress LMS options. Again, LMS, right? Thrive Apprentice is so much more than an LMS. It's a membership plugin. It's a whole ecosystem that I've integrated with my point of sale SureCart, and there's so much you can do with this. But if assessments are your thing and you absolutely needed the ability to grade somebody, perhaps combining it with their certificate feature that they have, I have a video on that here on the channel. These two things together make for a fantastic, if not completely phenomenal implementation for somebody that really does need to grade and assess things that their users can submit to them. And now that's completely doable inside of Thrive Apprentice. If you need additional help with your Thrive Apprentice setup, I encourage you to check out the Convology community if you're not already a member. And if you have additional questions, you can leave those in the comments down below. I'll also include a link to the Google Drive integration that we talked about.